So hi again guys, so today we are going to create some basic geometric shapes in Illustrator. So last tutorial we learned how to create a new document, how to create artboards. So we're going to just start from there. So to create a new, well, let's first off create a simple shape, and a simple shape would be first and foremost a rectangle. So once we have the rectangle selected, we could open out our swatches, and if your swatches panel isn't there, we could go to window and look for swatches and make sure it's checked. Right, so we could choose a color like blue, and this is basically what it's saying here. This is the fill color and this is the stroke color. So what that is if we were to draw a rectangle, right, we see here that it's blue, but if you look carefully, let me zoom in, and to zoom in I'm using the magnifying glass found at the bottom of the toolbar. If we zoom in, we'll see that there is in fact a black stroke, right? So to zoom out, I could select the zoom tool and hold Alt on the keyboard and click with my mouse to zoom out. Right, so this is a basic rectangle, and to resize our rectangle we have to be on the selection tool, and basically you go to any of these squares here, and that would allow us to reshape the object or whatever vector we have. Right, if we use the corners, we basically have a freeform tool, but if we hold shift while holding the corners, we get to scale it proportionally, right, like this. So now we could reshape our rectangle that we started off with very easily. Right, so this is our rectangle with our black stroke, or blue rectangle with our black stroke. So in the shape tool we have the rectangle tool here, and if we were to click this little arrow and hold it, you would see that in it has some hidden tools like the rounded rectangle, the ellipse, the polygon, the star, and the flare. So we'll just go through maybe these 5 today. And the rounded rectangle is basically a rounded rectangle edged here, right? And we'll go through how to create a rounded rectangle from a simple rectangle now. So if we go on the rectangle tool, you will notice that in CC versions of Illustrator we have these little dots here just below these corners, right? And if I were to use the selection tool and click it, I could bring it in and actually round off the edges here, right? And you can see a live preview as we slide in and out. So about there, and we could create a rounded rectangle from a simple rectangle that we just drew. And it doesn't have to be a rectangle. Any pointed vector, you will see more than likely this little icon pop up, and that you could use as a handle, right? Now cancel. If you select just one of it, you could just round off that edge alone, and to do that we have to select the direct selection tool, which is under the selection tool, right? So it has the direct selection tool, and what we need to do is select it first, and you see it's highlighted blue, but the others are not, and that way we could select it and pull it in and close that edge off, right? And very quickly you can see how we can manipulate simple shapes into a little more complex ones, right? So I could just select these objects and delete them, And I'm going to move on to the ellipse. So to draw an ellipse, you just click and drag. However, if you hold shift, you will get a circle. And again, we have here our object where we have a black stroke and a blue fill. Now if we select it, you will see here in your swatches panel and also here in your toolbar that we could select the color by just double clicking it, and we get the color picker, and we could choose whatever color we want, and it quickly changes the fill. Now if we don't want a stroke, in this case we could select the stroke, and we could either go right here and click none, or in our swatches panel we could click the none swatch right. That's the first one with the little red cross on it, diagonal cross, and we could select it, and that way there is no stroke on this object anymore. Right? So that's how we create simple vector objects. Now let's delete this and let's go to the polygon. Now, oh, I double clicked that, damn it. So if we were to click the polygon, as I said before, and draw a polygon here, we could get, you know, a polygon looking like this, which is a six-sided polygon, which is called a hexagon. Now let's say we wanted a pentagon, which is a five-sided polygon. We would click and drag, and with our arrow keys you could hit the arrow down, and that would give us a pentagon. And if we hit down again, we'll get a square, and then down again we get a triangle, equilateral triangle. If we go up, we could get pentagon, hexagon, octagon. Is it a decagon? Anyway, let's stick to the pentagon, like this. Or we could even just do a triangle, right? And you could see that we created three different objects here using the three different shapes, sorry, using the polygon tool, right? So that is how the polygon tool works, and also the star tool. So with the star tool, click and drag again, and with the up arrow we could increase the amount of points on the star or decrease the amount of points on the star with the down arrow, right? With the star shape also, we could hold Alt on the keyboard and kind of straighten out the amount of stars, the arms we have on the stars. So you could straighten it with by holding Alt on the PC, and it's, I think, Command drag on the Mac, right? You can increase, no, it's actually all option on the Mac. Control on the PC would give you to lengthen the star itself. So if we hold Alt, and we could lengthen the points on the stars like this, and invert it also by holding Control. Sorry, did I say Alt? Control. So this would allow us to make the star very pointy, or, you know, kind of standard looking 5-pointed star like this by holding the Control key. So let's delete our stars now, and we're going to this simple tool called the line segment tool. And with the line segment is the fastest way to create a line. Now to create a straight line in Illustrator is just to click and drag and hold shift, and that way you could create a line that is perfectly 0 degrees, and if we let it go, you notice that there's nothing. Let me show you. There's nothing here. That's because there's no fill or stroke. So if we were to add a stroke on this, a normal black stroke, you would see that the line appears. Right? Now, the line tool could also move. Right? We could rotate this by using our selection tool. Now, if we rotate, we could rotate freely, and you could see the degrees that we rotate with. Right? Let me go to edit, undo, rotate, or Command Z. If we hold Shift now and rotate, we are going to get 45-degree increments. Right? So we can rotate 45 degrees by holding Shift. Alright, so we can delete this now, and let's go back to our basic rectangle, and we can mess around with this a little more. Let's put a color in there first. So now if I were to select this color, it will only change the stroke color of it, right? So for now, let's take off the stroke and let's just add a fill. So let's add an orange fill. So now we have here a rectangle. If we were to select now the direct selection tool, right, and off click anywhere on the canvas, right, that way we don't have those corner points selected, those anchor points selected, we could select the direct selection tool and go to the anchor point to the edge and click it. And you can see that this has 1, 2, 3, 4 anchor points, but only one is selected. Now once this one is selected, we could freely move it and modify our object. Right? Now we could enable something called Smart Guides. So we could view, go to view, and enable Smart Guides, and this would allow us to see here those are the guides. See that pink line? That they intersect. So now we can know where the center point is on this rectangle and just go directly to that point. Right? So this will be half, and you'll see that the Smart Guide would help us dissect this object very quickly. Right? So we can now modify this object by dragging the anchor points, and that's basically what Illustrator is about, those anchor points and handles and stuff that we'll get into shortly. Right? So let's talk about how to modify this anchor point. Right? So now we know how to select it and move it. To adjust it, we need to firstly pull out a handle. So what we need to do is to convert this anchor point. So to convert the anchor point, we'll come down to what we say is the pen tool, which is one of the most prominent tools which you will get to in Illustrator. So the pen tool, if we click it, we could say convert anchor point tool. Well, the anchor point tool's here, sorry, we'll go to it, and then we'll convert this anchor point here by clicking and dragging. And when you click and drag now, you see those straight lines kind of start a curve now, and let's see what happens here. So now we get a nice curve, and now we have these 2 points here which are called handles. So we have a handle and anchor points, and these handles actually, when you move them about, move the path itself, right, and they adjust and curve the path. Now when I click it back, I converted back the anchor point to delete the handles themselves. So if I were to click and drag again, I can make the handles one more time, and these handles here we can move them. Now if I were to move these handles with the direct selection tool like this, it gives us a way of easily controlling the curves and also the shape of the object. So we can see here that we took a rectangle and we made the shape from it, whatever random shape that is. So let's try and make something a little more recognizable. So we could go with the ellipse and let us change this to blue. And first off, let's convert this anchor point on top here. And by converting that, we get two handles and the adjacent anchor points. So I'm going to go to the direct selection tool and pull this up a little bit. And now we can see here that we get a teardrop looking shape very quickly, right? And we could now just resize it, and we could also duplicate it. And to duplicate a shape in Illustrator, you have to be on the selection tool, select the object you want to duplicate, and hold down Alt on the keyboard or Option on the Mac, and then drag. And now we created two objects. Now we could select these two, hold down Alt and drag, right? And very quickly you could see how we could make patterns by using these simple objects, right? There's a faster way of doing this, and again we'll go through this in a later tutorial. So very quickly you could see how we have created a pattern there by just modifying a circle. So let's continue with using that fill and stroke again. So let's go back to that rectangle. No. Should we? Yeah. And in the rectangle we have no stroke. Let's add a stroke, black, or let's say a darker blue. Now let's say I want a thicker stroke. To get a thicker stroke, we have to be in the stroke panel, and that is found under window and stroke. And the weighting is what we want to increase. So as we increase the weighting, you would see that the stroke size increased, right? And we can easily change our color by using these swatches, or we could just use the spectrum right in our color panel to change it quickly, like that. And the same thing applies for the fill. There you go. So as you can see, we have in the appearance panel now we have a stroke 25 point, that is green, and then a fill that is this color green. Now as we increase or decrease the stroke, we change the look of the object. So for example, when we draw this circle now, it comes in at that 25 point stroke. So we can just select it and hit 1 or even 0.25, which is a very thin stroke that it has on it, that you're barely able to see it. However, if we zoom in, you will see it there. So we can change the stroke weighting in the stroke panel just like that. And that's it for creating basic shapes in Illustrator, understanding how anchor points work, understanding how handles work. So we'll continue vectors and creating vectors in another tutorial.